Thank you. And an extra special thank you to NetWays, because they do just a ton of work for these, and they make it pretty awesome, and I like it because it's less work for me. Just a few things. So breaks and lunch are upstairs on the lobby floor. The hotel Wi-Fi is pretty crappy. You can use it if you'd like. We do have the Puppet Camp 2014 wireless, but be nice, share nicely. It's limited connections, limited bandwidth. So we also have a PuppetConf ticket drawing. So one lucky winner today will win a ticket to PuppetConf in San Francisco in September. And to enter, you need to leave a business card or something with your name on it upstairs at registration in the little bowl. And we will announce the lucky winner at the second break. And then we also have another German Puppet Camp scheduled. I love these guys because they schedule them way in advance, better than we do, which is awesome. But we're doing one in Dusseldorf on October 16th. And it's right next to LinuxCon, so you can go to LinuxCon if you're interested in that and stay for Puppet Camp. And then we also, one more thing, we have drinks upstairs in the hotel bar. So anybody who wants to join us, we will be buying the drinks. So it's even better, but we're going to do that right after Jordan's closing keynote. And with that, I think I am going to just turn it over to Andy, and he is going to give the Puppet keynote.
Thank you, Dawn. Guten Morgen zusammen. Gut geschlafen? Auf einen spannenden Tag bereit? Hallo? Okay. Vielleicht nicht. Weiß nicht. Ich bin Andrew Parker. Ich bin Softwareentwickler bei Puppet Labs. Und ja, ich kann ein bisschen Deutsch sprechen, aber den ganzen Vortrag halte ich nicht auf Deutsch, sondern in English. So I'll switch right now. That was yes, I can speak a little German. So I'm Andrew Parker, software developer at Puppet Labs. I'm lead developer for the Puppet server components, which for most people in terms of what you're used to talking about, that's the master, it's the language, file server, that kind of thing. You can get me on Twitter at aparker42. You'll see me on IRC as Zaphod42, and you can email me. Of course. I get a lot of email. I don't know if I'll respond. I'll try. So let's start out with a quick poll of who we've got here. It's always fun to see who's in the audience. So who here is using some form of configuration management tool? Well, I don't care if it's Puppet or not. Just let's see who we got. All right. That's pretty cool. Now keep the hands up. Keep the hands up. The blood will start flowing out. Maybe I should move this a little faster. Okay, so of the people who've got your hands up, lower your hands if you're not using Puppet. So keep your hand up if you're using Puppet. Not that many went down. Well, that's cool. All right, so who's been using Puppet for? Let's see. We need to take away. Oh, I have to. Damn it. I did this in the wrong direction. Who is... And now I can't recover. Start over. Put your hands down. Yeah. What direction do I have to do this in? Oh, it's raise your hands. Right. I have actually done this before. All right, so it's raise your hands if you've been using Puppet for less than 6 months. Raise them high. Really? Not that many new people. Yeah. You're getting a free book. So that's an incentive for raising your hands. You're getting the we're giving out the Pro Puppet book because, well, if you're just getting going, it's a useful guide to how to kind of keep going. All right, so now this is another bit of interesting stuff. Who's been using Puppet for about a year or less? All right. And 2 years? 3 years? Wow. More than 3 years. More than 8 years. All right, good. Well, that's really cool. Now this is my own personal interest. Who uses a Puppet in the 3 series, like 3X? Very nice. 2.7. All right. 2.6. Oh, good. Good. Okay. 0.25. Oh, you laugh. You laugh. All right. Cool. And who uses PE? This is really Puppet Enterprise. Yeah. No. Okay. A few. All right. Cool. Thank you for that. That was my market research. That was very interesting. All right, so let's get into the real meat of the matter. And so we live in interesting times. So you'll often be told that this is an old Chinese proverb. May you live in interesting times. It's a curse. I don't know if it's a curse. Interesting times are cool. But there's also another part of that, which is it's not actually a Chinese proverb. It just gets called that. We kind of lost track of where it came from. But I want to come back to that idea a little bit later. So, but why is this interesting times? Well, it's interesting times because we're always getting more and more services that you have to manage, more servers that you have to manage to run those services. Each one of those services and those servers becomes more and more critical as it becomes part of the fabric of the way your organization works. And we can't really say that IT is ever going to get smaller. It'll never go away. That is simply the future of how we manage all of this information, how we manage all of these services. Anyone here remember maintenance windows? When you could actually just take it down and say, hey, Saturday, the services are all going to be down. Don't worry about it. We're doing maintenance. Do you still get that? Are you still able to do that? No? Oh, you are? Wow. Wow. Okay. Or having backout plans where you're saying, halfway through Saturday, yeah, the database upgrade's not quite working right. Yeah, we'll just restore from backups and it'll all be fine. Most of us don't live in that world anymore. We're asked to do more and more. More services, more servers, and we're asked to do it faster. Continuous integration, continuous delivery. They don't want a deployment every year. They don't want a deployment every 9 months, 6 months. No. You want 10 a day. You want to be able to just keep changing it. And if you do a day of downtime when you deploy 10 times a day, I think you've got a problem. So what do we do? How do we move forward from this? Well, one of the things becomes obvious. Our old practices, our old ways of working with all of this become our constraints. The idea that you have necessarily very specific rollback plans where you can go partway through and then just bring it all back, or that you've got one system administrator for 25 servers. When you've got 10,000 servers, you've got a pretty large organization of just system administrators to keep that going. So it doesn't really work anymore. Those maintenance windows aren't going to work, as I said. If you try to deploy 10 times a day and you even have 1 hour of downtime for every deployment, you're down for over half your day. Well, not over half. So, and then you've got this whole thing that failure is not an option. You have to make it work. You have to find some way of getting it going. But there's a bright side to all of this because a lot of the old constraints that you worked under are gone. You can now get 10,000 machines up and running in a matter of minutes. You start them up in EC2, or you use Google Compute Engine or Azure or any one of these other services where you just say, yeah, I need more capacity. Make it so. And then we also have that the workloads that we're working with can just shift really fast. So some of those constraints around how you had to do capacity planning aren't there anymore. You can get more disk space online fairly quickly if you use certain technologies. And the developers aren't gonna hold themselves back. Their constraints on how they deliver code to you are also disappearing, which means hopefully they're going to be talking to the operations team much more often and actually communicating. That's the promise. So where does that take us? Well, as I said, in order to make this work, you need some new movements in IT. Some new stuff is happening. We've got DevOps. DevOps says there's actually a way to handle this. And one of those ways is communications channels. It's about automation. It's about culture. And why do they say that? Well, because it's all about understanding what your constraints truly are. So you've also got a movement of the cloud. You can put stuff out there. You can do all sorts of things in the cloud. You don't have to necessarily have the hardware yourself. And that's another thing of getting rid of the constraints. You don't need your data centers necessarily, but you do. There are certainly places where you need them. And there's a lot of stuff going on. There's all these web ops style or web apps that are getting deployed. We used to call them thin clients. Now we just call them, it's in the browser. And there's no future in which that's going to change. Well, it'll definitely change. There's no future in which that'll all go away. So there's no future in which you're going to be asked for having fewer services or fewer servers. Or where people say, you know what? It's not that critical that billing is working this month. And what we see is that software as a service sets the trend for where a lot of this is going. You can see it happening there. And what is the trend that we're seeing? The trend that we're seeing is that you get to start kind of outsourcing the things that are not critical to your organization. Your organization is not defined by its ability to run email. Your organization is defined by its ability to do things that are specific to what that company is there to perform. And software as a service says, you know what? There's another way of dealing with this. You can have someone else run it. And it's there, then that's that organization's real reason to be, reason to exist, is to run that email. And so you can start getting rid of everything that's not critical to your organization. And then you can, once you do that, you've freed up yourself to start doing the things that are truly, truly important. You can pay attention to what are the servers and services that really have to work for you. And that's what Puppet is about in Puppet Enterprise, is that for us, running configuration management in the enterprise pays our bills. That's what we try to do. We try to make sure that there's a really easy way of doing this, that you can not think about all of the little aspects and everything that's going on. But it also means that you get to really move up the stack and say, really think about what is it that you need to provide to allow your business to move forward. Not necessarily like, oh, I need to run NTP. That's important, but that's not your reason to be there. And that brings us to the mission statement of what Puppet Labs, when we were put together, what it was that we said that we were going to try to do. And our mission statement is driving down the cost of technological change. We want to make it easier to make these cycles shorter so that you can do it much more effectively with less hassle, less risk, and much more confidently. So we started this 8.5 years ago. That was my question of if you've used Puppet for more than 8 years. I was going to be a little doubtful. Unless you were in the first few months of Luke writing the software. So Luke Canese started writing Puppet about 8.5 years ago, and it came out of a little bit of frustration. It came out of frustration with the tools that were available at the time. At the time, and it's still going on a little bit, but at the time, the kind of, I guess you could say, side project of every single system administrator was their configuration management tool. Everyone had their own, everyone reinvented it, but they weren't really making much progress. It was almost always the same thing again and again. And so rather than spending your time doing that, how about we all standardize on a tool, one that works fairly well, really well, as it gets better. And that widespread adoption will spur all sorts of innovation, because now we'll be collaborating on it, and everyone will be concentrating not on how to write that tool, but how to use it to actually perform the duties that they need to make their organization really succeed. So Puppet got started. It grew out of ISConf and LCFG and CF Engine, and actually it started as a system that was a plugin for CF Engine, as far as I understand. Yeah, kind of strange. That was its original thing at one point. But it's always been around servers. It's kind of always geared towards data center and cloud automation, and so that's where it's really at home. That doesn't mean we can't do other things with it. It's got the ability to manage networking devices, storage devices. In fact, some of the networking gear manufacturers have started putting Puppet on their systems, which starts bringing all of this together. Now your entire infrastructure can be defined in one system, in one service. And that is kind of the holy grail that we're looking for, the ability to define your entire infrastructure. Now, you can also use Puppet for workstations and laptops. There's a lot of people who do that. So it's not like that's out of our world, but it's a little bit more foreign to Puppet. But the way we do all of this on any one of those systems is through a very simple language that just describes the configuration you want to achieve. And this becomes the ubiquitous language of configuration. And it's got all sorts of advantages once you get a ubiquitous language like this, because now you've got a ubiquitous language, you've got a common language to talk about things with. So my background is I'm a software developer. I was a system administrator for a few years in a college. That was my student job. And I learned CF Engine. And when I worked with CF Engine, I have to admit I didn't know what I was writing. This isn't against CF Engine, but it's to get to this other concept, which is one of the advantages of making sure that everyone can understand it. Everyone can understand this configuration is now it becomes a method of communication. So there's this idea of DevOps that you need to shorten the communication cycles, break down those silos, get everyone talking, working together, shared culture, shared understanding. And well, in order to share that understanding, you have to share a language. So you need a ubiquitous language, you need a common language to talk about these configurations. And if everyone can understand this, which I'm hoping everyone can understand that, you got a big step forward. And now there's all sorts of other properties that come from this. Now that you've got this configuration for almost all of your infrastructure, almost everything you can think of and talk about, in code, well, what can we do with code? We can diff it, we can version it, we can tag it and release it and sign it. You can start tracking everything that happened with it. You can say, what changed 6 months ago? Oh, well, let's do a little git blame and find out. Who put this line in? Oh, I do that a lot, actually. Who put this line in? Why? What were they thinking? Oh, commit messages. Hopefully you're writing good commit messages. I never thought much of commit messages until I had to use them a lot. So this brings us back to that Chinese proverb where I said, you know, we kind of lost where it came from. It was fine. It was useful. And the current state is always a useful thing. But if you lose that heritage, if you lose that legacy, if you lose the version history, you start kind of making up lore. Why is the infrastructure supposed to be set up this way? Well, if you have the common language, now you can actually find out what changed to it over time to cause it to come to this state. And you may disagree with it. You might find out there is no good reason. But now you had a trail to figure that out through this ubiquitous language of talking about your infrastructure. So what's the next thing we do after we've got this ubiquitous language? Because having the language by itself is useful, but once you have it, you can do a lot with it as well. So the thing we can do is you do that define, you write up the description of what you want to do. And then we can take a look at the systems and we can decide, well, does the system actually conform to this description that I just put down? Is the firewall configured the way it says here? Is Apache there as in the way it said? Do we have all of the packages that we're supposed to have, the users that are supposed to be there, everything? Is it all there? And if it's not, what's different? And even just that ability is pretty powerful, because now you can say, well, it's different. And you can ask the question, why is it different? Is it different because we just changed something in what we thought our description was supposed to be? What the configuration was supposed to be? Or did something on the system change outside of our control? And that's a useful thing to know. Then the next thing you can do is you can enforce that change. You can enforce that configuration. The Puppet can take the actual action to remediate those differences. And that's another very useful thing that you can do once you have this language to describe all of your infrastructure. And then, of course, once it takes those actions, it can report on what actions it took. It can say whether they worked or not. And if they didn't work, you can find out what was wrong. Why was the system unable to achieve that state? So I imagine, based on all the hands that were up, most people kind of know this basic cycle, but let's review it one more time. So how does Puppet actually achieve this? Well, it has that description. And the first thing it does, though, is actually it figures out what are some interesting properties about the system it's running on. And that's the collecting of facts. It sends those back to the Puppet master. And then it takes those descriptions that you've written in Puppet Manifest, and it says, okay, let's feed these facts into these descriptions. And out of that will come the final abstract description of our configuration. So actually, that's another interesting artifact, that you've got not only the description of how to construct your configuration, all the possible different ways your configuration can occur, but you've also got a very standalone model of what is your configuration for this particular system at this point in time, in a very, very straightforward manner. And that's what we call the catalog. And you can diff catalogs. You can see, how did this particular machine's catalog change over time? There are tools out there to actually make diffs between catalogs. So the next thing we do is we take that catalog and we do the checks against the system, and then we make the changes based on what those checks say. Do we need to install this package? Do we need to upgrade this package? Do we need to change the mode on a file, change ownership, that kind of thing? And then it sends back the report of everything that it did, everything that worked, everything that didn't work. And you can get that, and now you can report on it. And this is actually a great point, going back to the DevOps things, a point of communication. Does anyone use information radiators? Like put all of their Puppet information into some very commonly seen form where people can look at it and say, oh, what's the health of our infrastructure in terms of configuration right now? Does anyone do that? No. Wow. Okay. That's something to think about. Because once you have that, now you've got a more of a communal understanding of how is our infrastructure doing. Oh, we just deployed 20 changes to these servers. Well, that was a lot. Let's take a look at it. And drilling down a little bit farther into more of the architecture of how Puppet actually achieves this, well, we've got the agents running on the system. They can run pretty much anywhere. You can put them on your web servers, your application servers, your database servers. As I said, they're now getting onto networking gear. And then those communicate with the Puppet master in order to kind of understand what it is that they're supposed to control their system to do. There's various security aspects that it has, the reporting facilities, and then one thing up at the top, we say Puppet Forge Content Marketplace. And once you start describing your infrastructure in this system of code, this ubiquitous language, you get another advantage. Because we've got this thing called the Puppet Forge. And one way I've tried to explain it to some people is, what is the thing that made Perl so powerful for so long? And pretty much everyone would say, well, it's not the syntax. Although I do like the symbols. They're fun. No, the thing that made it so powerful for so long was CPAN, the Comprehensive Perl Archive Network. The fact that you could go out to this library and get this communal knowledge, all of this understanding from well, I don't know if it was millions, thousands and thousands of people, as they had put together libraries to do things. And so, just like a programmer would never say, well, in order to produce a checksum for this file, I'm going to implement MD5. No, they'd say, I'm going to go to CPAN, download digest MD5, and use that. Because my purpose is not to implement MD5. My purpose is to understand what the content of this file is. And so that opens up a whole bunch of learning. Now, we are all going to be using the same libraries, and they'll interoperate with each other. I'll get to learn things. If Felix down here figures out a way of optimizing MD5 sum and sends a patch in and it gets put in, now everyone gets to take advantage of that. Because MD5 sum, yeah, you could say that there's ultimate optimizations you could do just for my own system setup, but that's pretty unlikely that it's useful time for me to do that. So what do we have with the Puppet Forge? With the Puppet Forge, we've got a place where everyone can start putting up all of the best ideas about how to really control all these configurations. So you've got modules to configure NTP, make sure time is in sync on all of your servers, to configure Apache or Postgres or MySQL. And once you've got all that, now you can start thinking about, rather than, oh, what is the directive in Apache to change the SSL encryption system stuff that I can't remember why I'd want to change it, but I know I have to do it. Oh, no, you know what? The best practices have been put in place in Apache module for whatever. Let's go with that. So it opens it up to, now you can share this code. You've got a ubiquitous language not only within your organization now, but with the rest of the world. So let's talk a little bit about Puppet Enterprise. So Puppet Enterprise was the system that Puppet Labs put together, where we decided, you know what, there's a whole bunch of components here of Puppet that, well, as I was just saying, it's not the most effective use of your time to necessarily spend so much time just trying to put together your Puppet infrastructure, because your purpose is not to have your configuration management system. Your purpose is to use your configuration management system to do something for your organization to really add value. So for Puppet Enterprise, we put together it as a solid platform of some of the best ways to actually put together Puppet. We made a whole bunch of packages for everything. Those packages all get tested together. We make sure that there's a particular Ruby in there that will not interfere with your own system Ruby. It can be self-contained. We test it to make sure that it scales to certain sizes. And then we give instructions on how you can take the basic installation and scale it even farther, so that you don't have to figure it all out yourself. There's support as part of this as well. We, of course, sell support with it. So rather than spending all of your time trying to debug all these things, you can actually just call up a person or send an email and get some help. And then there's also all sorts of documentation that we put together. So rather than spending all of your time trying to figure all of this out, you can use Puppet Enterprise, I would say software as a service, but it's not software as a service in the normal sense. It's just you're buying the system to do what you need to do. And of course, we added some additional features because, well, features are always good. So we added a couple different things to make it, some of these things that I talked about work just a little bit better out of the box, sometimes a lot better out of the box. So for instance, I talked about that reporting, that you get some really interesting information about what's going on in your infrastructure if you tie into these Puppet reports that the agent sends back. And so we put together this thing called the Event Inspector. And what it is it's a system. It gets all of the reports that get sent in, and it starts essentially analyzing them, correlating them together, looking at them in different ways. So you can take a look at them and say, well, how many of my classes ended up with failures or with changes? So, and now you can say, oh, there's a whole bunch of failures up there, and there's 17. Well, let's drill into that. Let's figure out what's going on. Maybe there's a particular class that has an error in it when it's working on a particular kind of system. You can also look at what's going on your individual nodes, kind of these different axes of looking at this data. All of this came from working with actual users We didn't just try to dream this all up ourselves. This was asking people, what do you need to look for when something happens in your infrastructure? Where do you need to look? How can we best present that information to you? How can you best find it? And going through interview after interview and trial after trial, asking people and putting it in front of them and getting them to figure this out. And so this is one of the things that we've added into Puppet Enterprise. And of course, once you've gone through all of this information, looked at it, you can then take action. You can decide, I see what's really going on here. Okay. Another thing we put in there is, are there MCollective users out there? Ooh, a few MCollective users. Wow, quite a few actually. So MCollective is an amazing tool. And sometimes it's an amazing tool to chop your leg off, but it's still really useful and it's great to have. And so one of the things we wanted to do was kind of put together a bit easier way for people who just want to do a few things with it. And so that's live management. And so we added a couple things. Parts of it are just control Puppet. Other parts of it are browsing your infrastructure. Because MCollective can go out and gather all sorts of information using Puppet about what all of your systems are. And so you can take a look at it and you can say, you know what, I want to find out what groups I have out there. Oh, and what variations of those groups. And then you can start asking the question, once again, this is all about insights into your infrastructure. You can start asking the question, why do I have variations on that group? Isn't it supposed to be managed? Maybe something's going on that I need to look into. Maybe I didn't manage it. Maybe I forgot about it, and it's one of those things that just kind of popped up on the system. And so live management for browsing becomes one of those really powerful things. And then, of course, there's the cloud provisioner, VMware support. By making it a system that you can buy and pay for, integrations with various third parties become a bit easier for us. So we've got integration with VMware where you can use our cloud provisioner system, which will start up a virtual machine and install Puppet onto it and get it connected into your Puppet system. And it's tied into the ESXi. You're going to figure out that I don't know too much about VMware. ESXi and vSphere and all of those virtualization systems that they have to actually tie into that. But of course, that's stuff that you pay for. However, Puppet Labs is very, very much into open source. And all of this is built on top of open source. There's a few parts of it that aren't, but not the major components. And so why do we do open source? Why would we spend all of this time making sure that it's open for everyone? Well, it's great. I mean, it's just great. I believe in open source. I think it's a wonderful way of doing everything. You get a lot more people involved, a lot of interest in it. A good way, actually, it's a very good way of getting that ubiquitous language. One way of thinking about it. But also for us, it ends up being a technical proving ground. One of the things we do with open source, and this is kind of one of the distinctions that we try to make between Puppet Enterprise and Puppet Open Source, is in open source, we're going to just try things out. Sometimes we'll break you. I'm sorry, we don't mean to. It just happens. 3.5.0 release was not fun. Although I saw last night that they just put out the first pass at a 3.5.1. So if you want to try it out, please do. Tell us if we've now unbroken you. But it's a technical proving ground. Those kinds of things will happen. We're gonna push the edges. We're gonna try to figure out where can we go next. And then once it stabilizes, we bring that back into PE. So if you want just a much more stable experience, move forward, not always pushing the cutting edge, but getting very useful stuff, that's one of the distinctions. The other part of it is, like Puppet Enterprise, we put it all together into a package that just works out of the box. With open source, it's a bunch of individual components, individual projects that you're going to need to figure out how you want to string them together yourself. And that is a very powerful thing. It's the Unix philosophy, lots of small tools that work together. And so But there's a bit of know-how that needs to go into putting that together, and there's some amazing setups that I've seen for people who use the open source projects. And they're always great inspiration for, well, how could we make PE a little bit better? So what are these components? Well, of course, the first component is Puppet itself, and it's the core language. It's the transactional system, it gets called, for enforcing that, where that's the actually apply the catalog, make the changes. It's the system that component uses for making those changes. That's called the resource abstraction layer, or also I kind of normally refer to it as the types and providers. And so that's the, what is a user? Okay. In specific, how do I manage a user on OS 10? That's a fun one. If you want some interesting reading, read the OS 10 user provider. And then also it's a way of getting to these reusable modules with the Forge. Of course, there's MCollective as well. MCollective is in there. It's a framework. Sometimes it's really easy to just see it as a bunch of command line tools for doing asynchronous actions across a set of servers. But in the end, it's actually a framework for putting together those kinds of tools. And what you're seeing is kind of a lot of examples of what it can do. There's PuppetDB. So Puppet produces a lot of information about your infrastructure. It produces all these facts every time it runs. It produces a catalog. It produces reports. And all that information is really, really valuable, really useful. So where does it go? Well, it could just go onto files on disk. But those are hard to deal with, hard to manage. Well, for that, there's a thing, PuppetDB. And PuppetDB is a way of storing all of this information, storing it in a way that's pretty efficient and really fast. And also a way of querying it. So you can do queries about, well, what servers are running CentOS 6? Or what was the last agent that checked in, I believe would be a query you could do. So it's all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, there's Factor. Factor is one of those things that just kind of gets forgotten, I think, a lot, because it's just there. But it's got a lot of very useful things in it, where it can actually inspect the system and figure out what is running, how is it on there, and you can add your own things into it, your own custom facts. And that can be put into modules and put up on the Forge, and then you can share those interesting bits of information you can get about your systems with other people. And of course, there's Hiera. Hiera is a hierarchical data lookup system. And it's very hard to, it's easy to say that, but very hard to explain exactly how it works out. So I'm not going to try, but it's a very useful, very powerful system for putting together data that you need to drive your infrastructure configuration. And then there's Razor. And the first time I heard about Razor, I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. So at the lowest level, it's a PXE booting system. But what it does with that is it first, you PXE boot your machine. It installs an initial very small operating system with Factor. Factor collects a whole bunch of information, sends it back to the Razor server, and the Razor server has a whole rules engine. And those rules describe what should this machine now turn into. And you can do all sorts of rules about, well, I need anything that has 8 gigs of memory and 4 cores to become X, but I only need 5 of those. So if another one shows up, let's do something else with it. And then it can install the next install the full operating system you want onto it. It can get Puppet onto there. It can get it connected into your Puppet infrastructure and kind of let Puppet take over from there. There was a process that we tried for a while, and we're still trying, called Puppet armatures. Because there's so much to this ecosystem, sometimes it's hard to get a complete view of how everything needs to work together and how it needs to change. And so we started trying this thing called the Puppet armatures process, modeled on PEP and JEP, the Java extension process and the Python extension process, I think is what, enhancement process, that's what it is. And I will be perfectly frank, it didn't work too well in our first few tries as it had it, but we still want it to work. We do want this kind of a system to be able to get a much more understandable view for large major changes to how the whole ecosystem works. And then, of course, there's the Puppet Forge, the CPAN of Puppet, the place where you can share all of the knowledge that you have about the best way to configure infrastructure and put it together in reusable components that other people can now take advantage of. And it's, of course, it's all by people out here. It's by the community for everyone else in the community. And of course, we're Puppet Labs. We're a group of people all over the world, headquartered in Portland, Oregon. And we've grown quite a bit. And we've got customers who have become very interested in Puppet. And so now we're almost all over the place. We're in, well, GE and Boeing. I live in Seattle, so Boeing is kind of cool. So they're just down the road from me. And of course, we're hiring. So if you're interested in it, let me know. We've got, of course, a lot of positions in Portland, Oregon, but we've also got a base in London. And so professional services engineers in this area are very interesting to us. So if you're interested in that, come and find me or Dawn or someone else on the Puppet Labs team. So you got all this stuff. You're using Puppet. And what do you do next? Well, one of the things you do next is you join the community. And I feel like I don't need to say that too much to everyone in this room because this is the Puppet community. That's what the Puppet camps are. And so you get to learn from others, what we're doing today. But other things you can do is you can go to ask.puppetlabs.com. It's a Stack Overflow or server fault type system for asking and answering questions. Produces a really nice knowledge base over time of what are the things you should be doing. Of course, you can also join us on the mailing list, the Puppet users mailing list, the Puppet dev mailing list. Or you can join in on IRC, on Freenode, on Pound Puppet, or Pound Puppet Dev. Join in the conversation, see what people are talking about. Maybe you'll see someone doing something that you think, wow, that could really change the way I do what I want to be doing. And of course, you can help us triage bugs, like any system. There's problems in it. And so keeping track of all of that and having good reproduction cases and really understanding the full impact that it has is really useful, really helps us drive and make good decisions about where we should be spending our time. And you can contribute code. We have a bug triaging process or a pull request triaging process for getting code contributions in. We're trying out various ways of dealing with this. And the thing we're doing right now is every Wednesday we have a Google Hangout, and we just kind of start going over all the pull requests and discuss them and see where we want to take them. And you don't have to join in to get your code in, but it helps a lot. It really gives us a lot of information about is this a good change or not. And of course, another one, and one that I think a lot of people should be trying out, is the putting your modules up on the Forge. Once you have something that works well, seems good, reusable, maybe someone else could find it useful too. Of course, there's also getting training and getting certified. We offer a series of courses, and of course there's the Puppet certification. And as Puppet becomes this larger and larger ubiquitous system for everyone to talk about configuration, there's, well, a bit of a need for people to know, do you really know what you're talking about? And the training is all over the place. We've got not only Puppet Labs doing the training, but we've got our partners doing the training. For instance, Netways provides some training. And we've also got some of the training online. We've started putting together some online courses where you can try them out, learn something. I need to take a look at these myself, actually. They're fairly short, apparently. And then remember when I talked about the event inspector and I said that we did a lot of interviews with people and talked to them and showed it to them? It was through this program. We have this program called the Puppet Test Pilots. And the idea was, well, we need a lot of help to make sure that we're doing this right. And so if you want influence over where Puppet Labs is taking some of our various projects, this is a great way to join in. You just sign up for the Puppet Test Pilot program, and every once in a while we'll send you an email saying, hey, We'd like to set up a time to talk with you and show you some stuff, get your feedback, and see where it goes. And we really do listen to this. I do know several times that we've gone and talked to people and then scrapped the idea and said, we need to try that again. That was not a good one. And so that's a great place. And then there's PuppetConf. You can sign up now. There's apparently a bit of a promotion going on. And it is a great way of meeting everyone. It's like Puppet Camp, but much, much more. Much more. And I believe we're doing a drawing upstairs, Dawn. Is that right? A drawing for Puppet Camp? Yes. Yes, we are doing a drawing, so find where that drawing is happening. I think it's at the registration desk. Yeah. Second break, we're picking the winner, so get it in before then. All right. And I actually have some time this time. Any questions? Nothing? I answered all your questions? Oh. What are our plans for the next major version? Are you talking about the next major version of Puppet itself? Yeah. So what are the plans for the next major version of Puppet? So the next major version of Puppet would be Puppet 4. So the plans for Puppet 4 are, well, so throughout the 3 series, we've been deprecating various bits of functionality that we want to get rid of, just dead weight, things that there are better ways to do now. So one part of Puppet 4 is, once Puppet 4 comes around, those deprecated pieces of functionality will just be gone. So that's one piece of Puppet 4, is leaving behind kind of dead weight. The other part of Puppet 4 is, has anyone tried out, if you're on 3, has anyone tried out the parser future? Yeah? Cool? Yep. So if you haven't, take a look at it. It is a feature flag, taking a bit of a line from the continuous deployment playbook. It's a feature flag to turn on some experimental functionality, some things that we're thinking about that we want to be moving towards. And so for Puppet 4, what's going to happen is in the 3 series, we're going to finish that up. We're going to finish it up. And in Puppet 4, that'll switch on to be the standard thing. Now the question is, what is that? So what that is we're re-implementing the Puppet language. So over the years, we've learned a lot. We've got some people with a much more experience on how to actually implement languages. And so the future parser is a new lexer, a new parser, a new AST, a new evaluator, and also it's going to be a new catalog system. It'll be network communication-wise backwards compatible with the existing system, but internally it's all going to change around. And while we're doing that, we're fixing up a couple things about the way the language works. I can give you the technical details. We're moving to what's called an expression-based grammar, meaning you can kind of compose anything together in any way you want, as long as it makes sense within the semantics of the language. But we're also going to try to get rid of a lot of the rough areas. So it's going to be a semantically different a language. It'll be a breaking change, and that's why that's happening in Puppet 4. There's bits of the language that are going to be different. So, for example, numbers will actually be numbers. For such a... What was that? Class dependencies will work. Classes inside classes? So we've already got a thing to fix that that's called the contain function. So instead of saying include, you say contain. Contain came out in 3.4? 3.4? So yes, various little things like that. Contain will probably change it, stay exactly how it is. But things like numbers will be numbers, that kind of stuff. All right. Any other questions? Got 1 minute. What is the future of Factor 2 now that we have structure? Well, now that we've got Factor 2, what's the future of Factor 2? So I think the plan is that during the 2 cycle, they're going to just start kind of taking some of the facts that are there and putting them together in a structured manner. So probably the first one will be about network interfaces. That's most likely their first one. They didn't want to do it because we delayed for so long on Factor 2, they wanted to just kind of get the functionality in place and not bog themselves down on trying to get all this out for Factor 2. So they figured, get the functionality available and then start using it. So, yeah. Hopefully, structured facts will start happening as it works out, yeah. Thank you very much. Have a good day.